Hello, beautiful humans. Welcome back to another episode of Naked Sunday. I am your host, Caleb Nelson, and I've got my friend here, Mr. Kira Shishkin, back on, well, not back on the podcast. Well, yes, it is back on the podcast, but he and I have tried to have this conversation a couple times now, and connection issues and all that other jazz, whatever, has plagued us a few times, but hell, we're here now. We're having a great time. Kira, thanks for coming and hanging with me today.
Yeah, Caleb, thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to finally be back on online and everything seems to be working.
Yeah, loving it, man. Yeah, this is great. You know this because we already took a shot at this the other day, but I like to do it anyway. I like to start my episodes with why I appreciate my guest. We need to start telling each other in this world why we love each other a little more. Call me crazy for believing that world peace is a possibility, but I think this is a great place to start. So, with that, I shared it with you once. I still resonate with that first conversation you and I had, and you took my mind in a different way where we started talking about age and this perceived block of time where the only time where we can really like be seen as growth and more or less taken seriously is between this, I think it was 35 to 55 when I remember you repeated the second time, where we have this window where like this is where you're just supposed to do all the things and all the pressure that gets put around that. And there was something I just really loved about the way you took that, and I loved your response because I really want to hear it again. Um, when you said it that way, I said before to it demonstrated to me that you think differently, and to think differently also is a prerequisite of humility intellectually, but also curiosity. And those things are things we need more of in this world. Curious people who think outside the box and are capable of, well, seeing the world differently, because that's how we actually solve problems. So that, my friend, was something that really stuck out about why I admire you. And so thank you for being you.
Thank you for that. Should we resurface that idea, that framework around age that you
Yes,
found so
absolutely.
interesting? It's something I love to share with folks because it's in front of all of us. It's something that's so visible in society, but I think don't talk about it enough. But my whole thesis is that around age is that we, as a society, as a culture, artificially shorten our lives, are like the rich part of our lives, by invalidating young people up until like 30 years old, and invalidating or dismissing a lot of the older people, from 60 onwards. And so there appears to be this golden age where we are neither invalidating nor dismissing the person based on their age. And it's somewhere between like 35 and 55. And you can call that the golden era of your life. And I just think it puts so much pressure on that period. You're supposed to have accomplished everything. You're supposed to have, been everything you're meant to be in that period, because before that, you're just an egg. And after that, you're just, a dying outgrowth. And it sounds really radical when I put it this way, but I think a lot of our society implicitly, and subtly, sometimes very explicitly though, does that, right? Like artificially shorten the human lifespan of just this small window of full validity. And before that, you're too young. After that, you're too old. And I just don't love that. I don't love subscribing to that framework. And so, something I've been doing in my life is I actually just stopped telling people my age. I just, people ask me why. It's because I say, well, that's never benefited me. Telling someone my age has never actually like benefited me in any way. And so I stopped doing it entirely. And I joke around. I say I am age non-conforming when people ask me. And I find that really funny. But the philosophy or the mentality behind it is simply that I don't love how this number has so much power in our society, and it's a very weak proxy for what it's trying to measure, which is ultimately experience, maturity, and both those things kind of exist on an axis of their own, on a timeline of their own, that isn't necessarily correlated or forcibly correlated to biological age. So I like to separate those.
I think you answered it even better, or went into that even better than the first time you shared that way. And That was really rich. I just love it. And anybody who's listening right now, are like, oh yeah, that's just a different way. It reaffirms what I said to start this whole thing off. Like it's just a different way to look at this. And I love that statement. What a powerful kind of catchphrase of like it's artificially shortening our lifespan, or at least the value of our life. And how ridiculous is that? And I even think about my daughter right now. She's almost a year and a half old. In a what 17 months of her life, she's taught me more about confidence as a 1.5 year old than anybody else in my entire life. And if I plugged her into a box of where I was going to get value about out of that relationship because of an age, I would have missed that perspective. So that alone, and anybody who's had kids and who's listening right now, I'm sure you're like, oh my god, my kids teach me a hell of a lot about a lot of things all the time. It's because of that. And if we could, I think if we take some of your perspective around this, we stop, and it can go beyond age. If we stop judging things just on surface level metrics, we're going to find a lot more richness and a lot more happiness, and dare I say, a lot more fulfillment in life, probably to grow even more because we stop prejudging or judging a book by its cover, as you said, by these artificial metrics. So, yeah, again, you answered even the reflection was even cooler than the last time you said it. That was fantastic.
There's one more thing
Um,
I would add to it, if you let me. There's this other thing that we do very naturally, where when we hear about someone's age, and we're very obsessed with knowing other people's age, we immediately relate it to the only sample size we have, which is our experience at that age, right? And then so you meet someone and they say, okay, well, I'm 17 years old. And you're like, well, when I was 17 years old, I was a degenerate, right? I was not paying attention. I was not motivated. I was just, I was not heading anywhere. And so immediately you're beginning to judge what it means for them to be 17 years old based on the only data you have access to, which is, well, who were you at 17 years old? And I think that's automatic. A lot of people, like, they don't even think about it, it just happens organically. It's like, oh, that guy is 22. Well, he must be an idiot because when I was 22, I was an idiot. And I think it's very, like, inevitable, right? Because that's our primary, native experience. We can't avoid not doing that, or it's very hard to not do that automatically. But it's also, it couldn't be further from the truth because your experience and the experience of this person that you're meeting has just so little in common most of the time. There's such different narratives and journeys that comparing yourself in such a way is only going to worsen what you mentioned around like making snap face value judgments.
yeah, wow, that is that's a great way of looking at it. We're biased against our own experience. We're even self-judging there too. We're limiting ourselves within that same statement. Within that, yeah, told you before. I'm like, oh, the worst that happens is we're gonna record this thing again. And here I am, even more excited at this conversation than the last one. I mean, that was hard to beat. Um, let's do this. Let's make sure we properly introduce you too, because we're already dropping insights, and let's make sure we don't get too far away from this. You know yourself better than I. Let's share with the audience, Kira. Who are you?
Yeah, with pleasure. I am a Ukrainian Israeli immigrant to the United States, a Generation Zero immigrant, and I'm an entrepreneur. I love finding problems that are worthwhile to solve and trying to solve them. I'm on my fourth company today, and it's one that I feel is most aligned to kind of my own personal story and honoring my story, but also the kind of how it supports the world at a time where I feel like the world needs this most. So I lead a company called informed.now, and informed.now is all about um, taking legacy news, traditional news, stripping it of bias, clickbait, sensationalism, verbosity, dramatization, advertisements, and just leaving with the facts that you can trust and surfacing those facts to the everyday person. It's not a fancy service for the executives or for board members. It's for the everyday person in America and in Canada. And the way we operate is actually through SMS. We are proudly the number one news by text service in North America.
This is going to be some fun stuff because I know we've talked about this a little bit more, and you've gone a little bit deeper now, and just from our couple conversations, your story really opened up my mind as like, oh, of course this makes sense why he's gone this direction. Um, so let's dive a little bit deeper. As you can see, my family rolling through in the background. It's all good. Um, let's dive a little bit deeper. Your story was really powerful. Obviously, you said you're an immigrant and you've seen a few lenses of the world now, but especially some of your early, well, I'm not going to give it away. Like, give us the story of how you've gotten to the States and how we've come here, the naissance, if you will, of birthing informed.now.
Yeah, I feel like what I'm doing now with informed.now really honors two like pretty important threads in my life. Not to mention, obviously, the market fit and the fact that this is a solution very needed at this time. But focusing on my personal journey, getting to lead this team and to lead this product, it's sort of a combination of two things. One is what we do is we preserve people's attention. We think attention is a holy thing. It's a sacred thing. And when you are able to wield your attention, you access your superpowers as a human. And we all have different superpowers, but they're all unlocked by being able to focus, being able to put your mind to something, and being able to essentially wield your attention. And so we do that. We protect, we safeguard people's attention. Um, and number two is we focus on world news and we focus on helping and empowering people to be able to keep up with the world in a way that doesn't drain you, in a way that doesn't overwhelm you, in a way that doesn't require a lot of energy and resource to do, but in a way that feels accessible and worthwhile, but also covers not just a local, but a truly global coverage around the world. So anything that's going on in Venezuela, United States, in Asia, in South America, all over, that is really changing the world. And so those two threats, the internationalism and the safeguarding of attention, both come directly from my personal experiences growing up, coming of age, and being on my journey that I've been on.
Take us on the journey, man, because your childhood experience, when we talked about that, I was like, oh, this makes so much sense why you care about good information and clarity. I didn't know if it was like obvious to you, but when I heard that, I was like, oh, on a very micro level, you learned like the power of this in terms of
Yeah.
attention and focus and all that. So, and then of course you talk about a global scale now, and I was sharing in one of our conversations, you can't you can't really solve macro problems if you don't understand it on a micro level, and by that I mean an individual level. That gets a little more into philosophical stuff. I don't. Are you familiar with the Hermetic principles?
Dramatic principles. I'm not sure.
The Hermetic principle. Well, the one I'm first thinking of is as above, so below, as within, so without, so the universe, so the soul. And in a nutshell, it's what is within me is outside of me, and what's outside of me is a reflection of what's going on within me. And the reason why that's changed my life, and I've shared about this a few times, is that once you see yourselves as a mirror, you realize like you are projecting yourself into the world. So if you understand yourself, you have the power to actually change the world. So most people try to control and change what's outside of them, but you can't do that. You can only control what is within. You can control yourself first. So your journey in terms of learning how to clarify and find better information and see why it's important, especially since you've moved and have traveled the world and you've been in different places, to me truly echoes why what you're doing is distilling things down into the simplest form. Exactly what you were saying. You're empowering people by giving them their intention back and giving them the purest information from which way they can make clear decisions in a way that removes the other distractions in your life. And again, distilling it, like the experts, who is it, Einstein says, if you can't explain it to a 10-year-old or something, or a 5-year-old, you don't know something well enough. The vein of that. I think that that's what informed.now is doing through your own personal journey, and that's what's given rise to it. So yeah, share us like the personal story of your why you've moved so many times, all those things. I think people are going to be, it's like it's such an obvious thing to me when I hear it.
Totally. Yeah, and I do agree that I do think like the, what I've built now, what we're leading now, this movement that we're leading is a very direct expression of me kind of healing or recovering from really life-changing experiences that have, shaped my life. Um, and I do think I've very much like personally walked the walk of this problem, such that now, having kind of solved it for myself, I want to help other people solve it too. And so the two threads that I hinted at earlier, the loss of attention and the importance of like an international perspective, they're sort of very intertwined in my life. When I was just a kid, I was a victim of a car accident that really, you know, disoriented me in my life like substantially. I woke up after a coma, not remembering anything about my life, or not remembering much at least, and not being able to recognize my father, not being able to really like think properly or think clearly. And as the amnesia sort of kind of like faded away, I started kind of being able to use my brain more and more. I found that for a really long period of time, I couldn't wield my attention. Like I couldn't learn, I couldn't concentrate, I couldn't remember things. And that state of, you know, for me was accompanied with a lot of other elements of disability. I was physically disabled, cognitively disabled at the time for a couple of years, and my recovery was very much far from certain. But what struck me the most, from the physical disability, from the emotional, from the cognitive damage, was the fact that I couldn't wield my attention. Like this idea of like I couldn't control my focus. That to me was, just an absolutely like biggest loss. That to me was like the greatest setback. And you know, I've recovered from that after years of kind of fighting for it, fighting to restore it. And the way that carries into my life now is like I know what it's like to not be able to wield your attention and feel like your attention is being jeopardized, controlled by something else, and not really your own. And when I look at the media landscape, which is the problem space that we focus on, I see that again and again. I see an entire industry constructed around disorienting people and confusing people and triggering people and not really informing people anymore, right? And so I have a lot of issue with that personally. It's a personal sort of chip on my shoulder and maybe a vendetta in a way, where I want to protect, if I can, other people who don't want to have this experience. How can I help them avoid this disorientation, this confusion, and this overall just, you know, puzzle that the news media industry has become? So that's the thread of like attention safeguarding and the personal lived experience around that. Alongside that story, I've had to move a couple of times. So I was born and raised in Ukraine, and then I wound up moving because of the accident that I was part of to Israel and spending almost a decade there before eventually moving to the United States. And so I've just seen, this sort of connects nicely to what I'm building right now as well, is I've seen the stakes, the high stakes of having credible, trusted information and facts around what's going on around you. Because I grew up in an environment that had so much information conflict and information warfare, so much bias, propaganda, foreign intervention in media. There was just so much. And of course, I'm referencing the Russia and Ukraine tension and war, the tension that bubbled up into a war. And I'm referencing, of course, Israel versus Gaza and the rest of the world sometimes, which also has its own multipolar information conflict reality. And now in the United States, I'm seeing it again, right? There's a bipartisan, bi-tribal civil war that is cultural, that is social, and just seeing these high stakes play out again and again, I think it's really important to give people a way to be informed without being influenced and give them the building blocks to make up their own mind on things without suggesting a perspective, influencing an opinion, and trying to manipulate the reader. And so these kind of like two separate threads create the inspiration and the personal motivation behind informed.now, which focuses on world news in a way that honors the reader's attention.
It's so powerful, everything you're saying right there. And one of the things that you were saying, the through line in all of this is like lack of trust, and I'm hearing fear. Have you ever heard of the phrase or the saying, if you can scare them, you can sell them?
Mm,
And everything you're talking about with propaganda, with bias, uh, as you said, this bi-tribal, this division, two sides, the dual. It's just pinning two sides of each other against each other. It's all fear driven. It's all fear driven, and it's because you're scared. So I'm going to buy a side and then make the other person the enemy. And that to me doesn't. It's not about, in those scenarios, it's all about control. It's about controlling where people go, where they spend their time, their energy, their money, their attention. If it's related to war, like they're literally like with their life. So that's why this information you're talking about is so powerful. Like, how do we give somebody back trust and confidence? That's why I think what you're doing is so valuable. When, as you said, the entire landscape is what it's just media pitching you fear. Like, here's the next storm, here's the next thing, here's the next whatever. Everything's blowing up. It's always just like flashing lights. God forbid it's social media and the 3 second attention span. That's just let me light you up, spike your hormone levels one way and then flip it the other way and go the other way. And just like you're on this emotional roller coaster. And to me, I think that people either just give up and lose hope or just stay in this constant state of frenzy and eventually just choose a side because it's easier than thinking for themselves and having more of a conscious internal dialogue, because it's either screw it, throw my hands up, give up, or intensify. And those two things, it's either ambivalence or fighting with people for the sake of fighting with people because they don't think they have another choice, just because they're like survival mode. So I think what you're doing is really giving confidence back to the individual. How do I remain informed? How do I make better decisions? And I think that we're in a time. I agree with you. I think we're in a time and space where that type of access is at a premium. Man, that's wildly valuable for somebody to tap into.
I love that you surfacing essentially like two different but related problems. And you kind of conflated them a little bit, which I think is there because they go hand in hand. But it's worth kind of teasing them apart and seeing like each of them for what they are. I think one of them, like one of the huge consequences of this broken media landscape, is that everything is designed to trigger you. right? It's the goal is to get you hooked on reading something and to come back to read it again because you are worried that you're going to miss out on something. And that's primarily done, and we call this trigger news. That's primarily done by triggering two emotions that are the most viral emotions, and it's fear and anger. When you look at a traditional newspaper, like at the headlines of the front page, whether it's a digital one or a printed one, doesn't really matter, unfortunately. You look at the headlines and just observe for a moment, like meditate on what are these headlines saying. I would claim, 8 out of 10 are surfacing either fear or anger. They're triggering either fear or anger because these are viral emotions. Because when you're feeling fearful, you have to tell your family, you have to tell your friends, you have to tell your partner, you have to tell everybody. When you're feeling angry, you want to be angry at someone, or you want to be angry with someone. And so you're spreading this information, right? You're addicted to reading it because there's a sense of urgency with both of these emotions, and you're driven to share it because you need to share it. It's not a haha kind of this is funny, maybe not funny. It's like I feel the need to share it because I'm scared. And I need my daughter to be okay, or I need my wife or my friends, I need them to be okay. Right. And so these two feelings have been on the headlines of news media for decades now. It's only gotten worse with time, and it's gotten worse with social media really bubbling that up to the surface. But those have been the tools of control for decades now, which is really unfortunate. So that brings me to this kind of like sensationalism, dramatization, and clickbait part of the problem. The other part of the problem is the bias, and they really go hand in hand, right? As we know, as we've seen it, regularly. And the bias problem is really, is really toxic. It's this idea that like there is some other party that's not you, and this group of people, they're terrible. They're inspiring fear, inspiring anger, and they have no good ideas. They're just evil, and you've got all the right ideas, and you're great, and you have to reaffirm yourself in that, and you have to protect yourself from them. And this sort of like artificial bipartisanship that exists in like definitely in American politics and American news is is another technique is another technique for like tribal level control, manipulation, and engagement of a population, where in reality, I do think a lot of our divisions are fabricated. I mean, they're fabricated not instantly, immediately in an article. They're fabricated over decades of ongoing uh, hyperpolarized media, right? You've got the Fox News, you got the CNN, and you know when someone is a CNN person, you know when someone's a Fox person because they recite those headlines. And then that comes through a few generations, and you have these tribes that are so rooted into the bias that's fed by one or another. And it's this echo chambering that's reaffirming of what you already believe in, and you start distancing yourself from the ability to have a conversation with the other side because now this other side is so villainous. And so, yeah, I think these two central problems, like the sensationalism, the structural sensationalism of news, and the structural bias of traditional news, is, it brings us to a point where we can't really read news anymore. Like news have been so broken and for so long that most people, especially in the younger side, don't read news at all anymore. And with informed.now, what we're building is a bridge. We're building a better door to enter the world of caring, enter the world of giving a shit without sacrificing your nervous system in the process.
There's a great tagline right there. You don't want to be brash and right to the point. The younger generation will buy into that. Like, that was awesome. What really dawned on me there was, so English is not your first language, obviously, right? And uh, I think something really valuable. I'd love to get your take on this, actually. So I speak another language. I speak French as well. My mother is French, and I've traveled quite a bit as well. And I was just thinking about, again, your pathway through life. And as you're talking about this bipartisan, these separate tribal things, I think an interesting gift that you have amidst this is that it's almost like you haven't been able to belong to a tribe. So you've been able to see, let's call it both sides, or you can think in two languages. That's the way I look at it. It's like I can understand this side and I can understand this side. Like for a long time, I used to be much better in how well I could speak French, but I would even start dreaming in French when I would go visit my grandparents for like a month. I'd get to the point where like I was dreaming and thinking in another language. Not enough people, but essentially it's empathy. Can you put yourself into somebody else's shoes so much that you could speak their language? Again, you're seeing, like you're looking back on the problem, the same problem that where you used to be standing, you're looking at it from somebody else's completely different lens. I'd love to get your take on some of what I just said there. I haven't fully fleshed out the rest of the thought, but that kind of came to the surface as I've been listening to you speak about this two sided situation we seem to have.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel like I've switched a lot of tribes throughout my life, and I don't, I don't, and I'm not, I don't buy into this. The other side is crazy narrative that I think is very much forced upon readers and forced upon just media consumers by the media narrative. Like there is no other side. We're all one side. We're all on the same team, and we also have so much more in common than we have, apart. And it's easy to forget that when you read media that says you won't believe what happened. These Republicans, burned a town. Or you won't believe what happened. These Democrats, they legalized cocaine. Like you just crazy sensationalized stuff, right? Like, and I'm just talking about the political example of it. So much of it is also cultural, ethnic, racial, social. There's so many different. Um, there's so much tribalism, and I've just never seen a person or a group of people thrive by adopting that mindset. Right? Usually, I see people thrive most when they don't villainize the other, and they don't create some scapegoat community or some scapegoat profile and start blaming all the problems on them. And I think just when you read media, it's very easy to fall into that thinking because the media does propagate that narrative. And so I guess to your prompt, like having switched a lot of tribes and having been part of a lot of tribes throughout my life, I just don't buy into this polarization narrative. Um, I never bought into it before, and I'm definitely not buying into it now. You know, in so many ways, with what we're doing with informed.now, is we're trying to create an infrastructure for anybody, no matter what tribe they're in, to be able to access. We're trying to build a well. The wells that exist today are poisoned, and we're trying to build a well that isn't exclusive to a group. That is everybody's infrastructure. Anyone can come in and get the facts, and they can use those facts to make up their own mind. They can, put those facts onto other assumptions and other experiences to form their own opinion, but at least we all have access to the same fact base. Because I think the way things are now is we don't even agree on what we disagree on. And the polarization is in a place of hyperpolarization where there's a real schism in the fact base, right? And there isn't even a common language to try to bridge these cultural, social, political, policy divides, right? It's why you can't talk to your friends about politics anymore in America. It's a taboo subject because it's not something that exists in the public discourse anymore because of the schism that I'm describing.
I'm 1,000% on board with what you're saying there. What was coming to mind is a couple things. My friend shared this once. He goes, "What's the rarest what's the how did he say it? The rarest group, more or less trying to say like what's the people talk about like the rarest minority, more or less. What's like the biggest minority in the world? And he said it's the individual. We're trying to fit ourselves into these groups and these tribes. And I piggyback on that. I've been writing a lot about this, about creating the cult of one, because we're all trying to join these cults and follow these gurus, name whoever's at the head of it, name the policy, the structure, the pitch they're giving you, right? Their version of whatever. This is the way and the only way, whether it's religious or they have. I come from the fitness background with like diets and exercises. Those cult like followings. Politically, it's liberal or conservative. Uh, name your thing, but the rarest of them all is the individual. Where it's like, who are you? Tell me how you individually think. How do you stand for yourself? I think we're coming to a day and age where that I think there's an emergence of how important that is. And what you were talking about there really resonated with some of those things. And it's I say it all the time. I grew up in a cult. Actually grew up in a cult that by most people's standards, or what they think of when you just hear the word. And the weird part, and you talked about the tribe. You've belonged to a lot of tribes. We leave one, now feel naked and afraid, so we go join another one because it's how do I say it? It's like screw you, dad. The teenage rebellion. Screw you, dad. I'm going to do my own thing. Or it's the person who goes from a breakup with their ex and they go date somebody who's the complete opposite just because it's like that person's all bad and bah, they hurt me and I'm sad and I'm gonna go join the other thing and then they're just as not happy in that one. And the truth is somewhere in the middle you find the integration, you find the middle ground, which is hard because you have to be able to see the good in both sides, not just the bad in both sides. And what is good or bad? Well, that's a hard question to answer. And is there such thing as good and bad when you go that far? So I guess where I'm leading all of that to say with that reflection is like, was there anybody in your loneliest of moments as you're dealing with the healing or I mean, moving to another country, that's scary. And you've done it twice. I don't know if you spoke English, especially when you moved to the States, but was there anybody who helped shepherd you through these times? Like what role did your relationships play in the transitionary places in your life with all of that?
Yeah. And I also want to acknowledge what you said earlier before like skipping it is
Yeah, yeah.
the this idea of like the rarest minority is the individual. I think that's powerfully said, and I think it's I definitely subscribe to that quite a bit. I think it's a great saying, and to me, like independent thinking, like what it's essentially describing is like independent thinking is really hard for a lot of people. It's really really hard because nobody likes to be the first person to do something. And independent thinking kind of requires that on a regular internal and external basis. And everyone loves to be part of something that everyone else already loves, right? Because we're such social creatures, and I think that's where the tendency to desire to be part of a club, of a tribe, of a cult, um, to subscribe to a belief that is already validated as adored by others or as like as embraced by others. It's so appealing. It's so tempting. Um, and yeah, I mean, part of what we're building and doing and seeing is, I think independent thinking has never been more important than today, where the world is changing by the hour and very radically so. And I think it's definitely a time for independent thinking.
Yeah.
But to your question on the personal side is, I've definitely felt alone. A lot of my experiences, I've definitely felt very alone through much of my kind of upbringing and this experience for me has been very lonely and difficult. That being said, I've definitely been supported through both my given family and my chosen family along the way. I'm someone who it's interesting when you're constantly like uprooting your roots and rerouting somewhere else, you just become like faster and more maybe more desperate in a way to root quickly and to build strong bonds because you know that the soil keeps changing and you will need a base wherever you are. And so I think one of the consequences of all this like uprooting and rerouting in my life is I've learned to sounds funny, but like I've learned to make friends really fast because um, I just really believe in that. Like I believe in being really proactive with kind of being open to people, seeking other people's company, and leading with trust and leading with service, leading with trying to be helpful to other people and building those relationships. Because if I did not have my friends, you know, in a moment of the accident, if I did not have my friends at the moment of all these moves, like I don't think I would have survived. And so I'm constantly like on the hunt for my people and put a lot of effort. Like I've never regretted putting a lot of effort into a relationship.
That right there is going to be clipped and put out there because I don't think enough people think about the value of their relationships. That was so beautifully said. And oh, that hit me like right here, man. That was powerful. As somebody who, I mean, I consider you a friend now, and I've had what, four, maybe that's a big number, two, three conversations with you. You're known, you're like right to it. Like, let's talk about the stuff. I love that. I love that about you. How else do you get to know people? And I love everything you said there. Like, it's about service, it's about providing value and building depth. How cool. There's so many people who just want to skim the surface, don't really build real meaningful relationships with people. And you talked about it. If you didn't have those relationships during those two big times with the air accident and everything else, you said you wouldn't know where you'd be. I wanted to reiterate some of what you just said there because I don't think that enough emphasis and value on being on creating those deep meaningful relationships is there. And I just love what you said. You're never going to regret it. And especially since the reality is shit's going to go sideways at some point in your life. It is what it is. There's going to be a health scare. Somebody's going to die. There's going to be a business failure. Something's going to happen. It is inevitable that there will be problems. Did you build the well? What's the saying that I heard once? It's like you don't build the well when during the drought. You have to build it before the drought. Something along those lines. Like yeah, you build it well before the drought at the drought, and like when the drought happens, you have resources to pull from. And the relational well is the most important of all. So that was really beautiful. Um, the other thought, and I'd be curious about your take on this. I agree that it's really difficult to be the individual. It's scary to think differently than the world. I've had this other thought, and I think that's why, like, I've thought a little very differently in my life. I think what might be even more scary is to be the first believer. And the way I describe it is if you're the one person dancing like a crazy person on the mountain, there's that crazy guy. He's doing his little wiggle and dance on the mountaintop. It's almost harder for that second person, the one to be like, that crazy shit that guy's saying over there, I kind of agree with him. Like, he's not that crazy. He's having a good time. The person who's dancing to their own music, the other person be like, I'm going to go do that thing. I've long said that I think people hire coaches because your coach is essentially your first believer. It's like, I believe in you and we're going to bring this thing to life or even think it's why things like long committed marriages are so valuable. I think it's the most valuable investment you can make in your own businesses. Like my wife is the smartest investment in business ever. Is that you have a partner when things get dark. Like, do you rally the troops, and do we come together and weather the storms together? Um, I don't know where the end of my thought train was on that, but all of that just kind of like rushed to the surface when you were saying something. It's really, really beautiful and so cool that, I mean, I haven't met you in person, and I feel like I have had a very deep understanding of your beliefs and your philosophies already. And again, 3, 4 conversations because you're just willing to be so open and vulnerable about your life experiences. I find that incredibly valuable. I wish, if nothing else, people had the courage to do more of that. So I've ranted for a second, so I'll let you
No,
take whatever you thought out of that and roll with it.
yeah, that definitely resonates. Everything you said, I resonate with. Um, I wanted to pick up the thread of like a lot of people shy away from putting a lot of effort into relationships, like up front. Like a lot of people shy away from like, oh, I just met this person. Like, I'm gonna play it cool. I'm gonna take it slow. I want to be, I don't want to like overcommit or overstretch or overpromise or just like I think people shy away from upfront like meaningful investment in a relationship because I think a lot of them are sort of um like I don't want to be played. Like I want to put in all this effort and then the person turns out like they're not really interested in being my friend or that they're not really, the looking for a new friendship, I don't know, whatever it might be. And I think that fear, which exists from both sides, ironically, almost always, I think really prevents a lot of deep, meaningful relationships from taking shape because, like, what if you do, like, overcommit and, or not overcommit, but like overdo it and like overinvest and like actually lean into the relationship up front? Like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like, maybe some form of your ego is going to be hurt. Maybe you like lose a little bit of time, a couple of hours, a couple of days, a couple of weeks of it's not much, it's nothing really. And the upside of actually investing up front and creating an opportunity for the other person to be like, oh wow, this person is treating me really well and I want to reciprocate, right? Give them the chance to reciprocate. And I think you'll never regret it. Like it's kind of a pleasure to do, right? And like unless something is wrong with you and you're like really hate being nice to other people and being generous with other people, um there is nothing that you're going to really like miss or lose as a result of investing a lot into a relationship up front.
Dude, I just love you, man. Like, that's this fear of being hurt or being like, we're all going to get hurt at some point in our life. It is what it is. But what you said, the upside of having deep, beautiful, meaningful relationships is so much greater. It takes courage to put yourself out there, and I think true leadership is putting yourself out there and allowing yourself to be, yeah, sometimes hurt, but also you learn more about yourself, I think, in the process than anything else. So yeah, yeah, I just, the relational thing, it's the most important thing we can really do in our life. And what else are we doing other than to connect in our life? Like, what else are we spending our time doing? It just walking from point A to point B is or it's walking to point A to point B with somebody and sharing the road and sharing beautiful conversation and creating something beautiful together, more than what you could do by yourself. I think that's where the meaning and the substance of life is created. And if we don't even give ourselves a shot, we miss out on all that beauty that's left there. Not only that, perhaps what you leave behind for other people. And it's, dare I say, it's actually selfish to not open yourself up to love and connection because you're withholding your gifts from the world. if you never allow that collaboration and that union and sharing experience to exist in the first place. And the only way you get there is by being vulnerable, by being open, by letting others in. Saying all this from a place of as somebody who has struggled to let people in at times, like to be open, to let that love happen, to let people help me. Like the lonely thing, like everything you've said today, I'm like, I'm looking in a mirror, man. Like this is here. So everything you say, just like ding, ding, little checkbox, little checkbox. I'm like, yeah, that so resonates with me. It's really beautiful.
Well, thank you.
So,
It means a lot coming from you, and I do think we've got a lot of resonance in the way that we think and the way that we, you know, walk the path. So yeah.
yeah. I'm looking at the time. I've got three fun questions. We'll go a little lighter now. We've gone heavy. We've gone deep today, but we'll go a little lighter now. There's depth behind the questions. I'll share what they are afterwards. Um, Question number one: what sports or creative activities did you play in or participate in when you were younger? And one and B is how did you play? Like, what was your style?
Wow, this is so interesting because the sport that comes to mind, or the activity, I would even call it an extreme sport. Like, it's hard for me to say like what is a sport, what is an extreme sport. But an extreme sport that I picked up pretty young, as my sort of recovery sort of took shape and I was able to be active again, and this took again years. Um, but this extreme sport that really speaks to me is free diving, which is essentially the act of submerging deep underwater. Um, I prefer open water, so like ocean or lake, something that isn't a container, not a pool. And doing that without the assistance of any sort of technology. There's no gas tank, oxygen tank. There's no tools like that, right? So you are pretty much naked underwater, holding your breath for an extended period of time. And to me, like, this is not a team sport, right? This is very much an individual, independent type of. This is a sport of the individual, very much so. And you're there very much alone, under a lot of pressure. Um, but the feeling that I really loved about it is, it allowed me to be really present in a way that like no other activity did, because there's nothing else that you can think about when you're submerging at 20 meters. I mean, we're speaking feet, right? So like 60 feet, 70 feet, 80 feet underwater. There's nothing else you can be thinking about but that present moment, the beauty of what you're seeing, and the obviously the experience of like, hey, I can't make a mistake. This is a high pressure environment, and something about the presence that that sport demanded of me. I really loved, and to this day, I'm a very passionate free diver. And gosh, now I can do like 90 feet in open water, a couple of minutes, and it's just so much fun to go up and down. It's such a simple experience. You just go up and down, holding your breath, but it makes me feel a certain way.
It's such a cool response. I mean, I was immediately terrified. I'm like, that deep underwater. Oh my God, there's no way. I'll share with you why I asked that question. And your response was cool. No, that's not true. I've had one other person who was a free diver. When did I have her? She teaches breath work. You might find that episode actually really interesting. That might have been like a year or two ago. Um, Closer to three, maybe. Anyway, uh, so in college, I studied kinesiology. For everybody who's listening, that's a very fancy word for study of human movement. And one of the first classes I had to take was around play. Now, I kind of threw this out the door because I thought, whatever, who cares, gives a shit. But the importance of play is that play shows you a lot about how you go about solving problems or about how you exist in the world, more or less. So, what I find very interesting about your response is look at your path in life of how you're existing, the things you're drawn to, attention, very focused. All the things are removed. You just talked about it. Like, am I removing technology? Am I removing distractions? Sometimes it's a lonely path. Leadership. You've drifted off into the world, into lonely places, often by yourself, to find yourself, to be with yourself. And it is very simple. Go down and go back up. Uh, so what was very cool is that your response and your thing that you're drawn to from a creative or a playful endeavor is very much in line with the work that you do, removing distractions, being very clear, being very aligned, being very focused, giving attention back. Uh, that was a cool response. That was really cool. And I didn't know that you were into that because that would scare the shit out of me. And that's more power to you. So, but any thoughts on that one? Have you ever heard of that?
What?
The concepts around play with that.
No, no, it's completely new to me. I didn't realize that kinesiologists studied play, but you're studying the movement of play?
No, study of human movement was my thing because I went into fitness and whatnot. But
Yeah.
one of the foundational courses was around one of the big concepts we had to study, and one of the classes I took was around play. Which, for the record, free play for me as a person is very, very difficult. I like score structure and I like to win. So, like, if there's not, and there's a reason probably why entrepreneurship works well for me because, like, you can measure some things and there's kind of some rules we can make, which is also at the same time I like to break the rules. It's a whole other ball of wax. But like for me, I've played sports. I like team activities. I tend to always be the leader. I've been like the captain of things. I like to be able to play many roles on the field, those kinds of concepts. So those are when you zoom out and you strip away kind of the what's the word, the minutia of what's happening. You know, what type exactly of sport is, like, yours is swimming and where somebody else is playing, I played like to play lacrosse. um, Take the name of the sport away and you look at the fundamentally how you go about solving problems or the things you're drawn to, what are the things that pull you forward. um, it those things arise of like, oh, why does your persona latch on to something like that? So that's where that comes from.
Yeah. No, definitely makes sense. And it's very cool that you studied the kinesiology of play as part of your education. That's really, really cool.
Bizarre dude sometimes, man. Always just adding to the players, right? So then we'll go to question number 2. If you're stranded on an island, deserted island, you get to bring one movie and one TV show with you. What are those? What is the show and what's the movie and why?
So this would be like a piece of media that I would consume over and over again for the whole duration that I'm on this island. Wow.
Maybe
Well,
for
not
life.
yeah, maybe for life. Well, I think I do that anyway already, with Star Wars. So I don't need to be put on an island to watch Star Wars for the rest of my life. And I feel like it also kind of fits the category of both a movie and a show because it is a movie, but it's also like a show. And like I love all the creations that are associated with Star Wars. So like I think a lot of people like it's like, oh, I love the original trilogy, and I don't like anything else, or I like the first six, but nothing else. But I'm like, no, if it has like lightsabers in it, and it has any semblance of Star Wars, if it's Mandalorian or like whatever all the later shows that have been created, I love it. And so I think Star Wars movies or movie pick any um, and the shows are we perfect. You won't be able to get me off the island.
I mean, you like to free dive already as is, so you can free dive and you can go back and watch the Star Wars series, and then you're set. You're like, I don't need to leave. A little bit of food to go along with it, be all right. So the reason why I asked this question is I believe the entertainment we engage with tells us a lot about the things we're drawn to as a whole. Uh, and considering that you said this is your fourth or fifth company, if I remember correctly, I've yet to meet an entrepreneur who does not have 1,000 ideas all the time and thinks very creatively about lots of things. And what you talked about is like you're not stuck on one of those things. Yes, you like the through line, you like the main story, you like the branches also that come with it. Yes, there's some of the pure elements that you like to bring with it. If there's lightsabers, you're gonna be happy, and some cool characters along the way. Um, but it really illuminates the things that empower us. And I've said this before. I think storytelling is the most powerful thing we can do. As we just talked about with information, all these tribes are selling stories, right, wrong, good, bad, us, them, those types of things, versus what's the story we're telling, like truth. What is the truth? And how do we have clarity on all of that? So I think that there was something really powerful. And I just love your response. I like Star Wars too. One of my best friends, he's a big Star Wars nerd, and he just can't get enough of it. So we went and saw the new Avatar the other night, and there was the Mandalorian movie. I think it was like a couple minute trailer, and he was just like, "That's for me." You could see he was just so geeked to be able. It's just like we're gonna go see that one together. I'm like, "All right, bro, we'll do that." All right, third and final question: what is your deathbed meal? Who are you sharing it with, and why?
I don't know if my deathbed meal has to be any different from like all my other meals that I love. I'm just usually trying to eat my favorite food, and my favorite food is sushi. So I'm eating sushi today, I'm eating it tomorrow, I'm eating it this weekend, and I'm probably also gonna eat it on my deathbed. There isn't some special sushi, like no, just the usual sushi that I love and just always been a really big fan of. Like I've never been much of a cook. Like I don't love to cook things, but I love making sushi. And to me, it's mostly a shopping experience. But I love like procuring the right ingredients, putting it all, assembling it all together, and just the simplicity and the healthiness and just the taste of sushi I love. So I don't think that'll be any different on my deathbed. And who should I share it with? I mean, um, my mind's been recently like a lot of my sister as we're trying to get closer in our relationship, and we've been distant for a couple of years. And so um, I don't know if, saying the rest of my family will be there. They probably won't, right? Just because of, if it's my deathbed, it's probably been their deathbed. They're already past their bedtime. Um, but I think my sister, that would be a special person to to share that with.
What does your sister represent to you? Like, what is it that she teaches you about yourself,
About myself.
or what do you admire about her?
Yeah. I think she combines like a really special mix of creativity and resilience. And they're not really like related features. Like there isn't like creative resilience. I just think across her sort of character arc and her narrative, I've seen her, you know, express and be just extremely creative in a way that I admire in a broad sense, and also extremely resilient because she's also gone through a lot of similar adversities as I have, and I just love the way she's managed all of them.
You're gonna like the reason why I asked this question then. So I have this saying or guided meditation, more or less, that I've made, and it's who's holding your hand on your deathbed. And if we're to choose who's going to be there at our deathbed with us, it becomes very clear who we need to spend more time with. So just the fact that you guys were kind of apart for a little bit and you're getting closer, like that's really cool.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I love it. No, these are great. Yeah. I actually love that we haven't like talked that much about informed.now today. It's been refreshing because it's all I do and think about. Um, but if someone wants to learn more about like the mission and how we're doing things, our company's name is also the name of our website. Um, so informed.now is both the name and the website. And that's definitely the best way to explore, right? If there is news minimalists or folks who just want their attention back among our listeners, I mean, I think that's the best way to do it. I'd love to get feedback, to hear back from anyone who's resonating with the mission, and that's probably the simplest way. Gosh. I have a couple of like aphorisms or like just sayings that I've sort of just shaken out over the years or something I really believe in, right? And maybe I'll share a couple of those that really resonate, and I think they also honor the conversation that we've shared. I think like one of them is um, anything that happens to you has the opportunity to make you stronger if you let it. If you let it as the main part. Um, And the other quote I like, I forget, it's some author, some like B-list author, not very famous, but he said, I think maybe Paul Valery, the best way to make your dreams come true is to wake up. And I don't know, something about that quote also has always resonated with me, and also feels right to the spirit of our conversation.